enormous fan. I eat pulses religiously every day. But more importantly, I had the first time I had realized the importance of pulses was some 20 years ago, during Zimbabwe's land reform. Yeah. I was a PhD student at the time when the land reform began. It was, perhaps you are familiar with this land reform. It was obviously a question that was internationalized very rapidly. There were sanctions on the country, financial sanctions, military sanctions, and the whole Zimbabwe question went into a prolonged period of economic warfare and ideological warfare. One of the first things that happened in the land reform, it was a radical land reform. Over 80% of the land was taken just in the first 2 or 3 years, and redistributed widely. The first thing that obviously happened is the cash crops in the big farms, the large-scale farming, capitalist farming areas, the production fell rapidly. It was the obvious consequence of taking those farms. They were cash crops mainly, but with some other food crops, wheat and so forth. But the cash crops like tobacco and so forth took a real dive in production. And in the ideological warfare, there was much criticism of the fall in production due to land reform. And I remember very well that Sam Moyo, our brother Sam, first of all, did not feel that these farms needed, these new lands, resettled lands needed to be producing what the large farmers were producing in any way. So there was no lamenting on that part. But he did lament the fact that there was not enough recognition of the new production trends that were already underway from day one during the land reform. And one of the specific points he made is that pulses were on the rise. The production of pulses were on the rise. And this was partly captured in the statistics, but he still, from his field visits and the team's field visits, he seemed convinced that the production of pulses was rising much faster than the statistics were showing. So in that kind of situation of radicalization, of land reform, pulses were a natural resistance response, yeah, to the crisis. So, and that kind of stayed in my mind for so long, but I had never, until this book came out, realized the dimensions that this that pulses have in terms of food security, in terms of environmental benefits, and nutritional benefits. This is the first book I have seen now that brings all these pulses together and treats them in one go, bringing out the production patterns, the geography of it, the particularities of every kind. Yeah, so I highly recommend it for those of you. It's on. You can access it online. In fact, if you just Google it, I'm sure it'll just come up. So yes, so my congratulations for that. I don't have much more to contribute. There's just a couple of things to say. I agree with the panelists that have spoken so far that much more needs to be put into this, the production of pulses. And also note that in certain places over the years, there's especially one of the case studies, or one of the references that was made was to the European Union, which actually post-production has declined sharply because of precisely of the neoliberal type of EU agricultural policy, the reformed one, which I won't go into the details, but in any case, ended up killing much of Pole's production. Yeah. So even in the north, they've they've neglected this, even though Canada and some others have moved on with large-scale production. So we need to have much more of a concerted effort on a global level to promote the production of pulses. The other point has also been made. The role of MNCs was also a bit of news to me. The fact that MNCs are so, with one or two cases that I saw mentioned in the book, the Cargills and so forth were involved in. I think it was in the chickpeas. I'm not if I recall correctly. But and the rest, there was no mention, hardly any mention throughout this book of multinationals, and I don't believe it's due to neglect. It's probably due to the fact that they're not involved. Yes, and that was another revelation. So that raises the question that Walter has already raised. Should this proceed, production, should this challenge be taken seriously, will this sector also be captured? Yeah? And what is to be done so that it will not be captured? Finally, I was also surprised that soybean, there was some Brazilian case studies, especially of beans, black beans and brown beans, but there was no mention of soybeans, and I was wondering, well, soybean is not a pulse then, but it was reclassified as an oilseed. Or reclassified or just classified?
It's always been.
It's always been. Okay. So I was just my ignorance there coming out. But I was also pleased to see that Brazilian case studies analyzed in this report. So thank you again. I recommend the book very highly. And congratulations to you all.
Thank you, Yeros. So